On June 2nd and 3rd, 2011, the Center for Design and Geopolitics held its first annual conference in La Jolla at Cal IT2, the California Institute of Telecommunications and Information Technology, on the campus of the University of California at San Diego. Okay, so now we do a bit of a technical feat here as well. We have Metahaven standing by in Amsterdam. One other quick logistical note I want to sort of make is that we're tweeting the proceedings at, I should have mentioned this earlier, the hashtag DGP 2011. So there's several things that sort of are ready, so if you're tweeting along, we use that and we can have another extended conversation. There's several people who are watching online. I see Daniel there from Amsterdam, so I think we're ready to go.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. So
okay.
Let me just make a quick introduction of Metahaven. I want to thank John Welchman, who's not here today, but for making the introduction. Metahaven originally. Metahaven are really, in many respects, the most genuine designers of those who are here today. No apologies to Teddy and Hernan, but also the editors of one of the best books I have on my shelf, a book called Uncorporate Identity, which is a treatise on it really from branding to the way in which geopolitics can be designed. And in many ways, their project I found to be kind of closest conceptually to a lot of what I had in mind for the center originally. So I'm very pleased to have them here joining us. They're also well known, perhaps a bit infamous, for a rebranding a WikiLeaks project that they had started quite a while ago before WikiLeaks was quite so notorious, but has since been otherwise successful in its own right. So let me just give the particulars then. Metahaven is a studio, design research studio based in Amsterdam, founded in 2006. Daniel van der Velden and Winke Kroek. Much of Metahaven's early work, his writing, is combined in this book, Uncorporate Identity, which I strongly recommend, featuring contributions from Boris Groys, China Millville, Keller Easterling, David Gruwal, and others. Metahaven's solo exhibitions include Fiche Frontière in Bordeaux, the Stadtdat in Stuttgart. They've exhibited at Forms of Inquiry in London, On Purpose Design Concepts in Bristol, Manifesto 8 at the European Biennial of Contemporary Art, and so forth. Daniel is a senior critic in graphic design at Yale and teaches at the Sandberg Institute in Amsterdam. Winke is a tutor of editorial design in Arnhem and teaches at Otis in Los Angeles. So, assuming we're good on the tech, it's my strong pleasure, my real pleasure to hand it over to Daniel and Metahaven. Thank you.
Hello. I hope the connection's okay. All right. There we go. Thank you. Thanks for the introduction. Thanks for coming. The internet connection from Amsterdam is rather crappy. The connection that you have on your end is very, very good, we've been told. So Metahaven, we were already introduced. It's a visual think tank in design. And I'm going to just show you a few slides from this book on corporate identity that Benjamin just talked about, which really talks about this issue of identity, state, and network, which we think is a sort of key issue where many sort of contemporary affairs that touch both on the idea of geopolitics and design sort of come together. So one of the projects we did early on when we started out was designing identity for this place called Sealand, which is a kind of semi-sovereign data haven in the North Sea next to England. And from then on, our practice really has sort of sprawled on. So these are just a few slides from the book. And the key idea of our practice really is to combine, research, investigative practice with visual work, so that you have, in a way, the richness, or try to have the richness of both, and not be confined to either sort of theory or just, producing forms. But we're also working for clients, and we're trying to bring the work that we do, the research that we do to the projects that we do for clients too, and hopefully the problems that we solve for them as well. So the book is 600 or something pages. I'm not going to show all of them. Just quickly plowing through until we're getting to the topic of our talk, which will probably closely tie in with what James Fowler has been talking about earlier, which is the nature of the potential of networks to constitute some sort of mode of governance. That's really the question that we're trying to answer. So meanwhile, you see coming by this sort of writings on soft power and network power, which are sort of important in the branding, the idea of branding. It's funny that branding doesn't really have any other really political definition other than through this concept called soft power, which was created or found out, discovered almost by Joseph Nye, the Harvard professor of government. And we're very interested in network power as a sort of almost by contrast, you could say. There's lots of writings, lots of guest contributions in this book, as Benjamin already said. All right, so now let us get to our talk. It's called Big Society or Blissful Nowhere, Reflections on the Ultra-Minimal State. And it's entirely written out, so it's going to be, I'm going to be quite boring from now on. Okay, so last Sunday, May 29th, was the date announced for the European Revolution to take place. Set to happen in all major European capitals, probably with Luxembourg as the only exception, it proposed a gathering of social movements in the spirit of Cairo's Tahrir Square. This revolution, by the way, was not to be televised, as the much-missed Jill Scott-Heron already had advised. Instead, it was exclusively coordinated via Facebook. Only thing was, it didn't happen. The European Revolution is now more modestly called a meeting, and its next due date is set on June 5, so it's sort of postponed, the European Revolution. That said, the debt-ridden countries of the European Union are definitely on to a fundamental civic uproar that would have seemed inconceivable only a decade ago. Not just Greece and Spain, but also the UK and Italy are flooded with broad-based protest movements, and more countries are to follow. It is the culmination of a long trend where the decisions of government and business, hereafter called the system, have been experienced by the population as at the same time impactful and meaningless. After the 2008 financial crisis, this hollowed-out formal authority has chosen to, on behalf of the abstract forces of global finance, have the social body of the population carry the burden and cost of its risks. The austerity measures, the cutbacks, and the anti-democratic repression of dissent that has followed are giving more and more people a reason not just to be cynical, but to be angry. As the German sociologist Ulrich Beck wrote more than 2 decades ago, the risk society is characterized essentially by a lack, the impossibility of an external attribution of hazards. Risks, for Beck, quote, become the motor of the self-politicization of modernity, end quote. So the question that pertains to this talk is if the new civic movement and the political moment we are in now is to be identified with any particular opportunity in the design or redesign of government, service, products, and care and aid of community, and so on. And we're trying to suggest a perspective from an investigative and speculative point of view. Hyper-neoliberalism. Of course, Europe has not rid itself from the ghosts of neoliberalism. These ghosts of neoliberalism are only one more abstract hazard to be added to the list, one more among many other risks looming over everyone like a man-made tsunami. The abstraction of things like capital and neoliberalism, however, as was recently noted by Keller Easterling, makes up for an ideal perpetrator. Like any networked phenomenon, neoliberalism can never be properly defeated. Neoliberalism is more crime scene than perpetrator, more stage than actor. With the exception of Iceland, none of the European countries have fundamentally altered their relationship to global finance or brought what many consider to be those who did it to some form of accountability or justice. The current model, hyper-neoliberalism or anarchy in the UK, takes the role of global finance for granted and uses the financial crisis to electroshock the neoliberal doctrine back into life, as the British author Mark Fisher has recently noted. So Iceland has now introduced legislation for itself to become a transparency haven, which welcomes investigative journalism and research-driven media in a new pro-democracy model. Transparency on finance and the state's embrace of its blessings was what was lacking, which brought down Iceland's biggest banks. But apart from Iceland, which is not an EU member, other European countries are still as eagerly anticipating their Moody's credit ratings as they expect their gains at the Eurovision Song Contest. So the song hasn't really changed. On the other hand, the anti-capitalist model, which some predicted would become obvious to the masses once the financial system had shown its real face, has not gained any traction. What is popular instead is this idea, recently voiced on the Canadian, Dutch, French progressive blog page Watch Out for the Bullets. The text reads as follows on this blog page. Rosie, will you come with us to the south of France? We're looking for cheap property and housing, especially in the southeast corner, where you manage your own garbage collection, cure your own cheese, and pave your own roads. We could have more parties, and the neighbors wouldn't call the cops because we'd be in the middle of a blissful nowhere. So as observed, there is no Marxist plotline. The keywords are still property and manage. People, now that their desire to redesign the system has cooled off, want to live away from it all and self-organize their resources, abandoning a system they find as difficult to understand as a credit default swap or a subprime mortgage's long-term returns prognosis. So they did not co-design this. The system is what they're in, but it's not theirs. And now they want to pioneer out into the wild, or better, the semi-wild, because the electric power grid, the sewage, and an internet connection are among the last but essential remaining goods that they demand from the state. What can go is its pledge to protect us, its calls to moral duty, its regulations, its preachery, its surveillance, its fake brands, and most of its representatives. Things get tricky when it comes down to taxes, which no one pays voluntarily. The south of France, the state of nature, is to these new survivalist pioneers what suburbia was to the baby boomers, minus neighbors and daily newspapers hurling onto the lawn. So, the coming insurrection, which is an ultra-left manifesto publication and status report on the control societies published by Semiotext and MIT, is yet another fine product of the French countryside. Its writers are united in an entity called the Invisible Committee. And in New York City in 2009, students and other lovers of radical politics organized its impromptu premiere at a Barnes & Noble branch, which was quickly interrupted by a store manager who said, "Listen, I don't know why you're all here, but there's no event here today," asking everyone if they could please leave now. On Fox News, Glenn Beck gave the book considerable airtime in order to highlight the dangers of a looming left-wing revolution. In a society where a limited amount of mainstream news outlets provides views on the same facts to the whole population, a book like The Coming Insurrection would be of little significance. But a former broad mainstream steadily dissipates and fragments into a massive archipelago of fringe markets. We are fast approaching a situation where there will be nothing but fringes left. But those fringes will in some be as large as the former middle ground. The objective focal points, the daily newspaper and the evening news, are steadily replaced by personalized information cocoons. So MoveOn.org's Eli Pariser has recently described this phenomenon as the so-called filter bubble. Human-centered software is designed to cater users with a diet of what they like, with undesirable consequences for the diversity of opinions and positions we observe from our information cocoon. And of course, Cass Sunstein has referred to it in recent years by the metaphor of echo chambers, where the like-minded congregate and agree so that a larger picture of reality narrows down to fit the presumptions of a conspiracy theory. Pariser focuses on the design preferences of social software, while Sunstein centers on the inherent preferences of humans to like what they already know. The prevailing truism that good news spreads on Facebook and bad news spreads on Twitter is living proof that code and design should be treated as a mode of governance and as a candy store, all at the same time. The coming insurrection, then, is indeed a radical pamphlet, but it's perfectly at home in this new information environment. So the irony of the current standoff is that both sides seem to some extent in agreement, considering a deep cynicism about the state as an organizational model for society. They only differ on what to do with it. On both sides, social media play a very dominant role in coming up with the answer. The protesters first need a tool to organize without having an organization, which is a very libertarian idea to begin with, which of course was elaborated on in great detail by Clay Shirky. Meanwhile, the state, by contrast, promotes civil society initiatives, and then it is sometimes hard to decide whether it does so out of genuine conviction or as a Potemkin compensation for the state's own gradual fade-out. In the previous example, that planned retreat into autarky in the south of France, as well as in most current thought on the future of statehood, we approach what the libertarian conservative philosopher Robert Nozick in 1974 called the ultra-minimal state. Are we approaching a moment where the left will be saying things that would have made Ronald Reagan smile? Or not to mention Ayn Rand? Maybe. Maybe, in fact, we are already beyond that point. So, the thesis, as it is often posed, is, with regard to coordination in social networks, Twitter and Facebook help facilitate the Arab Spring. That's what we often hear, right? The proof is not just in the usage of these media, but also in the frequent mention on protest banners and street writings, and in an Egyptian father calling his newborn daughter by the name Facebook. This narrows down, however, the broader issue of social coordination and focal points to name-dropping star social media. In fact, the promotion of the rather abstract and inherently problematic concept of internet freedom as a spearhead of American policy abroad is a form of state branding, taking on the project of soft power where Hollywood and Coca-Cola left it off. But no one, however, disputes that Twitter, Facebook and their standards allow for users to organize and coordinate without a formal structure, as they can, so to speak, crowdsource the faculty of organization to a remote server. So this is an image from Hillary Clinton delivering her address on the internet freedom, and this all comes from a publication we designed called The Exorcist for the Van Allen Museum. The use of orange is not there for Dutch state branding reasons, by the way. So this issue was on negotiation, and we had an article in there on internet freedom and so on. So, but as noted, the capacity of states to intervene in this process should not be underestimated, as was noted by Yevgeny Morozov and many others recently. In fact, Egypt, the police used Western software to listen into Skype conversations by the protesters, who deemed themselves totally secure. So what do you do once the despot, often the most visible figure of power in a much broader-based political corruption, is finally gone? It is literally like what to do with a company after you've changed logo. The argument for the role of social media in the design of alternatives to crumbled modes of governance is still largely to be made. Ironically, again, the place where it is made is in the crumbling welfare state of Europe. When in the UK in 2010, a coalition government of Conservatives and Liberal Democrats took office, David Cameron, the new Prime Minister, had already been branding his approach to government by giving TED Talks. His vision repackaged the old conservative preference for small government into a brand new wrapper based on Wikipedia, YouTube, and collaborative Web 2.0 practices, which Cameron observes to flourish everywhere. So this is coming from a magazine contribution to Icon that we made, where we replaced the Encyclopedia Britannica by the Wikipedia Britannica as a sort of visualization of David Cameron's vision about Britain. So the Conservatives contended that a smaller state could be compensated for by a bigger society, where a social fabric of endless generosity would take over the remains of a faltering state apparatus. How exactly this almost Mediterranean conviviality should pan out in the alienated housing estates of wind and rain-swept Britain was not specified by Cameron. So we came up with Britter, like the British variation on Twitter, as a sort of part of this, this speculative branding campaign. After being appointed, Cameron went on to name so-called vanguard communities, while spectacularly cutting back on the state. In fact, he went as far as being completely anti-government from the comfy seat of government. In February this year, as the New Statesman observes, quote, "The Prime Minister vowed to open up almost all of the public sector, bar national defense and the judiciary, to private and voluntary providers. The state," Cameron wrote, "will have to justify why it should ever operate as a monopoly. Through the creation of a new presumption in favor of a range of providers, the Prime Minister would go further and faster than Margaret Thatcher or Tony Blair ever did," end quote. So in March 2011, Cameron at his party's spring conference named bureaucrats, quote, "the enemies of enterprise, taxing, regulating, smothering, crushing, getting in the way. The bureaucrats in government departments who concoct those ridiculous rules and regulations that make life impossible." So as part of our state branding exercise, we also we speculated in the future of public policy and about the reports from think tanks. So this, it would start, these books don't really exist, they're part of a kind of projection. So it starts very friendly with the idea of crowdsourcing democracy, and then, you know, as it proceeds, it becomes governing the ungovernable. And then it becomes libel laws in defense of Britain. And then it goes into the rise of the anti-social class and what Britain should do about it, and why the well-connected will live longer, social media, life expectancy, and healthcare in Britain. So this is a kind of projection of where the sort of technocratic governance apparatus could take this ideology, basically. So anarchy in the UK. Cameron calls his the post-bureaucratic state, but of course it is a hyper-bureaucracy, as a technocratic superstructure, which was once brought in under a center-left veil, is now the power apparatus which takes any civic disturbance or disruption of its normal proceedings and routines as a threat to national security and the economy, at the potential suppression of free speech, free press, the freedom to gather, and other such fundamental civil rights that we assumed were set in stone before us. So, the design challenge is something we would like to call face state. This hypothetical polity embodies the double-edged sword of the social network. It can exist as a tribal assembly or a village in a self-organized governance, always, of course, underpinned by a social network, a positively minded, action-packed multitude of change seekers who do not possess formal organization, who are unpaid as members, and who do not have formal ranks or letterhead, and without the critical tools of social media would be completely unorganized in search of a next level of their structure. But the technical governance over this network is a real issue at hand. Is this a platform in which their constituencies, the user base, have a voice? Will the future constitution of the social network be co-authored by its civilians? And this is the Facebook logo is only one sort of horizontal dash away from becoming a currency symbol. So this is probably where currency is going to. So that's one phase state. And the other phase state is one that's actually much less desirable. So if the answer of the questions of network governance remains no, and the ultra-minimal state sets its course of action as it currently does, then we are going to see a phase state whose idea of phase is about biometrics and surveillance, and not about people. And this is the phase state that is unfortunately currently under construction. So it's a kind of surveillance state. And after such a state has stopped providing people with opportunities, a system may change phase overnight. It may have gone to sleep as the benefactor, but wake up as the tyrant. So, thanks. weird. But I can see you, though, so thanks.
Thank you, Daniel, very much for the presentation. So Daniel will also be joining the conversation after the panel next door.